And over history, you can never find any point in history where they gave up their power. What they did is they did a lot of sleight of hands and went underground or behind the scenes and let other people become frontmen, but they've still stayed in power. You can see a lot of, I give a lot of evidence of that in my Bloodlines of the Illuminati book. Just some everyday examples that I ran into is, as a boy, you know, I met Henry Cabot Lodge, and someone who would read American history would know about John Cabot exploring the United States, which was of the Italian Caboto family. This is an ancient family, and yet you can see their influence in history all down through the years. Recently there was a book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Well, I say recent, it's not been recent, but it became a bestseller, and then the authors made a trilogy of books, Messianic Legacy and The Temple and the Lodge, and Pageant and Lay and Lincoln were the authors of that trilogy of books. And they go in and discuss how all of the royalty and aristocrats of Europe are descendant from one single bloodline. Now, of course, then when you go to look at our presidents, you find that 11 of our presidents, at least 11, are part of that bloodline.
At least 11 presidents are descendants from European royalty.
Right, the Merovingian dynasty, at least 11. And a man recently, you know, David Icke, you may have heard of him,
yes, says
that he has the genealogy charts to show that all of our presidents were related. I have, in the talks that I've given in the last couple of days here in Austin, I showed a genealogy chart that I have, which shows 12 of the American presidents very closely related.
Okay, Fritz. Well, you talked about how these Illuminati families, when they have power, and we can see that, then they go into hiding. Most people would say that the Templars, the Knights Templars, were one of these Illuminati structures. Could you explain basically how they supposedly went into hiding? Because you hear about the Templars, they had quite a long reign, and then the French turned against them, and then they were outlawed by the Pope, and then they just disappeared out of history.
Right, and but they didn't. Although the Pope outlawed them, they were able to flee, and initially they went to places in Spain and Portugal, and from there they boarded ships and they sailed to Scotland. And there was a decision made to give Scotland its independence, and the Knights Templars that landed in Scotland then in the Battle of Bannockburn helped the Scottish gain their independence, and then became very prominent in the affairs of Scotland.
Well, you know, Fritz, I saw the movie Braveheart, and I don't remember there being any Templar Knights in that movie.
Yes, that's true, but the movie ended before the Battle of Bannockburn.
Oh, all right, I understand now. Okay. Well, Fritz, now that we know basically a little bit about the Illuminati and about how they structure their system, can you give us a little bit of the mindset of these Illuminati families? I mean, why do these families, these 13 families and other families, feel that they have the right or the authority to control almost every aspect of our lives?
These families, since antiquity, have believed that they were gods, and of course they have been worshipped in many periods as gods. And they continue to pass that prideful belief down from one generation to another. They believe that they're a superior being. Oftentimes, when I've seen quotes by these people or heard people relate what they heard, you see that they refer to us as ants or cattle, and they basically have the idea that they were born to be gods and rule us, and we were born to serve them.
Okay, so they felt that they were gods and they were worshipped as such in ancient times, but with the rise of Christianity and things such as the Inquisition and maybe even the Reformation, shouldn't the people of history have stomped all of this out?
They made a decision that they would use Christianity for their own ends. So they established churches that they themselves controlled, and they went behind the scenes and set up a lot of fronts. So what you see, for instance, as proof of what I'm talking about, is at the end of World War II, there was a commission sent around Europe to examine all of the churches and cathedrals that had been damaged by the bombing, and they found something like 80% of these churches had hidden occult altars underneath the Christian altar that wasn't exposed until they were damaged. In other words, what was happening is these churches were built on ley lines, and satanic rituals had been secretly practiced in these Christian churches all down through the Middle Ages and up to present times. These were sacred sites that the churches were built on. In fact, some of them were built on very sacred druid sites and things like this. And so the Christian churches were simply functioning as a front so that these people could do their human sacrifices and so forth in secret. And of course, then they became pillars of society with their multiple personalities. They could have a front personality that was the ideal Christian, and on the Sabbat, on Friday night, they could be sacrificing somebody, and perhaps on Sunday morning, they could be the reverend that was giving the sermon. There's a number of other proofs that one can or evidences of what was going on. If you go throughout Europe, you'll see a large number of the churches had winged reptilian gargoyles put on them, including something that's really bizarre. They would have people, statues of people bent over how do you describe it on television? They're bent over taking a dump, you know.
And this is on the side of a cathedral?
This is on sides of churches that were built, that the statues built, naked people showing their bare bottoms. And if you ask, why did these Masonic trade guilds build gargoyles and people taking an excrement, you're told they did it for Christ.
And I guess, Fritz, people really don't understand is that most of Christianity evolved from the Catholic religion. And the word Catholic itself means universal. And so they just went out into their areas and just absorbed all of the local religions of whatever land they were at.
That's very well said. There were a number of mystery religions that bestowed their authority into the Catholic Church. For instance, the mystery religion of Dagon had which was the fish god. And you'll notice that one of the symbols that the Christians use today is the fish. And the Pope's hat, his mitre hat, was the crown of authority of the head of the mystery religion of Dagon. Mm-hmm. So he at one point in history was given the authority to be head of that mystery religion. And so yeah, the Catholic Church was a good way to also absorb a lot of the paganism Right, besides being a front for the more serious, hardcore.
So you mean,
witchcraft.
Fritz, when I'm driving around in my car and I see another car in front of me with the little fish symbol on the back of it, that the symbol, in reality, even though they believe it represents Christ, is really a symbol for the Dagon mystery religion?
I don't think that you'll find Christians putting it on there because they worship Dagon, but all I'm doing is saying a lot of these symbols have histories beyond what the Christian church thinks about. You'll find a lot of, well, for instance, I have personally with my own eyes seen a good number, or I don't know if good is the word for it, but I've seen a number of churches with the Masonic Knights Templar logo on the side of their churches.
And what logo is that?
It's a cross and a crown.
Cross and crown.
Right.
Okay.
It's a particular, it's designed a certain way, and it's very clear that it's a Masonic symbol. And there's a lot of other symbols. I've seen all-seeing eyes. There's Catholic churches that have the Illuminati all-seeing eye, you know, that's in the pyramid.
Well, speaking of the all-seeing eye, our local cable outlet, basically who helps us put on this show here, Time Warner in Austin, their symbol for their corporation is an eye. Isn't that kind of funny?
Yes, well, it all ties together. It's an enormous thing that's to someone who hasn't been initiated into, who hasn't studied this, the whole the subject is so vast and so incredible that it's really difficult to absorb. That's why I really strongly encourage someone to begin by reading the Bloodlines of the Illuminati book, where I have the time to lay things out systematically, so you can see that this thing started in antiquity. These people controlled everything back then. They never gave up control, although they have worked through trade guilds and the Masonic Lodge and other things. They've always had the power. They never gave up the power. And when this country was created, we thought that we were getting away from the aristocracies and the kings of Europe. But lo and behold, like I said, you know, I can document that 11 of our presidents are related to the royal family in the United Kingdom.
Boy, I tell you, Fritz, this all sounds so incredible, just like you said. When you were doing research for this book, how much documentation did you actually find which supports your outlook and beliefs on the Illuminati?
Well, I've done many years of research, and I was just joking with somebody that I was visiting this morning, because when I moved into my new house, I had been telling people I had 100 boxes of papers, you know, documentation, newspapers and stuff that I collected. But after I had filed those away, and I counted, I had 140 boxes left. So a lot of what I have learned was because I've worked for years with people that are trying to escape the Illuminati, and they helped my learning curve greatly. They point me in the right direction. And a lot of information is right there if we scratch below the surface. But they realize that there are very few people like me that are going to be looking in the right direction and scratching under the surface. So, and they don't have time to hide it all. So there is an enormous amount of information out there that relates to these families. And I just am the type of person to plow through enormous amounts of information. That was just, I guess, the gift that God gave me.
So what you're saying then, basically, Fritz, is that the information is out there, and really all you have to do is begin to search for it. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that a lot of the readers, once they have read my Bloodlines of the Illuminati book, and then once they maybe have read some of the other books that I have and gotten a basic understanding of what's going on, they're going to start seeing these things all around them, and they can teach themselves, and they can further their understanding on their own without